All right, so this is where we are with our destruction setup, and the last remaining thing we need to tackle are the interior walls. So, and I think we can just hide everything else. So let's disable windows, window frames, exterior frames, pillars, and maybe even the main building walls. That's fine. And we can just copy the main building walls, say paste, and rename it as interior walls. Go to Voronoi fracture, and before we forget, let's give it less fracture. So maybe let's just do something like 300 for now. Birth objects, remove what's in there. I have a layer for just the interior walls, so I can go interior walls, Alt Q. So these are actually just the walls, and I kind of want the floors too. So I can basically just select everything that's here. Pick H, select everything that's here, and set the color to maybe, let's start with pure red for this one. Hide selection and get out of isolation mode. Enable this, and here they are. So F4 to see. Okay, so I feel like the amount of Voronoi here is just about perfect. Now, do you see how the walls are more fragmented than the floors? I kind of want to fix that, so I think we are actually going to separate it into two events after all. So I'll just duplicate this node, paste, and rename it as interior floors, and change the color to maybe pure purple. And for these floors, I just need to remove all of the walls, disable the flow, and go into birth object just so that it stops updating, and just remove all of these interior walls from that birth object. And all I have left are the floors. And then for the interior walls, I just want to remove all the floors, right? So enable flow. And now they are different colors. And we can maybe reduce the amount of fractures for the walls. So Voronoi fracture and set this to just maybe 250. And that still seems to be pretty high. So let's just try 50. And I think I'm gonna just stick with that. And same as with everything else, we need the surface test again. So I'll just copy it from the main building and remove the Voronoi from here for now. Set the color to maybe orange. And we can send out both the floors and the walls into this surface test. So now I can tell Tyflow that once they're inside of our activator box, they can be fractured further. So I'll just copy this green event again and paste it here and connect it to the surface test and update our flow, see if it's working. And it is, they're turning green and being fractured further, so that's good. So we can remove this split that we copied over, and I can just use the time test that I already have in here to gradually over time get these green pieces to get sucked into the vortex. So again, this purple node is our vortex. So just copy that, paste, set the color maybe to pure blue, switch the output side on the time test, and connect those two. So what I can do is split the yellow pieces into two events and maybe send out maybe 80% of the yellow pieces will turn into green and then blue, but the remaining 20% or whatever will just remain untouched. So I can do another split operator, put it here. Let's just remove these connections so it's not confusing and hit escape so it stops updating. Delete connection. So everything that's true inside of this surface test will get sent into the split. Then we can say that maybe 80% of the split particles should go into the Voronoi fracture, and then that should go into the blue ones, and the rest of them can just not get broken. So I'll just copy this time test, hold shift and paste it over here. I want the smaller pieces to get activated first, which means that this time test should take longer. So I'll just set this to 60 instead of 40 and then I can connect this to the final event. So I'm just skipping the in-between step of the Voronoi. So let's refresh and see if it's working. And it's working as expected. We are getting some nice variation in the sizes of the blue pieces. Now they all still do look the same because they're the same color. So same as before, we can just copy this last node, copy, paste, delete this connection, make this event maybe orange again. So it's like a bright fiery orange, and connect this time test to this event instead. So remember, these are our bigger yellow pieces, the blue ones are our smaller pieces. So maybe the smaller pieces can move faster. So just leave that where it is, and find target for the bigger pieces can be slower. So velocity, maybe we can just do 8. And for the slow speed, we can set that to 5. So the bigger pieces again will be slower moving than the smaller ones, and update it. All right, so everything's working. Very occasionally we get the bigger orange piece, but vast majority of them are very tiny. And the orange pieces are indeed moving slower than the blue ones. So that's it for the interior wall setup. I don't want to make it any more complex and slow down the simulation more. You can always go back and add another level of destruction. You can add another Voronoi, just like we did many times before, but I'm calling this good. So let me just enable everything and show you what our final destruction setup looks like right now. Okay, so updating the entire scene, and one issue that I'm seeing right away is that the pillars are getting destroyed almost sooner than the windows. So there must be some mistake that we made with the surface test, because it's all just happening too soon. So if I just go here under the pillars and stairs, it looks like the mistake that I made is that the surface test, which activates everything, is all the way down here for some reason instead of being here. So remember, that has to be the node right under the main one, because that activates everything else. So let me just delete this connection and delete this connection. We can connect this time test back to where it was leading to before, and then move this one back up to the send out, delete this connection, and connect the surface test in between. So it goes from send out to surface test, and then from surface test to here. And let's update it. So we're getting the windows now. And then when the box approaches, the pillars start getting destroyed. So that seems to have fixed it. Perfect. So let me run the simulation for the whole thing. And don't forget to save, please. Just hit Control S as many times as you can. All right, everybody. So I did the simulation for the entire 500 frames. It took about 5 minutes, so still ridiculously fast considering just how much there's going on in the scene. So now you can just sort of watch our hard work and everything that we've done. We're getting everything slowly ripped apart. I love seeing the window frames and the glass and all the detail mixing together. We have the building ripped apart, then we have the interior floors ripped apart. We have the orange pieces that we just worked on in here. The only issue that I see right now actually is the vortex, because if you watch my original example here, the pieces seem to be getting smaller much faster, while in our example now, we seem to be building this almost tornado style effect up here. And I think it's just because the pieces are taking too long to get small and disappear. So they're just sort of building on top of each other, and we're getting this giant wall of debris. Now, this might actually still be cool. You know, I think there's nothing wrong with me sort of rendering this out and just calling this like a cool final effect. But let's just problem solve this a little bit and see if we can get this wall to be reduced. So I'll go back into Tyflow and disable everything, maybe except for the interior walls. And we're gonna use those as sort of the guinea pig to test things and see if we can fix the vortex. So disable all these, main building, disable, and maybe even the interior. Let's just enable the interior floors and disable the walls. So you see, when I do just one event, it's working beautifully because there's not that much stuff stacking on top of each other. But once we enable everything, there's just too much. So let me go down here into the vortex under scale. And I think we just need to increase the fall off so that they get smaller faster. So maybe let's just make the fall off 500 centimeters instead of 250 and see if we can get these to just scale down faster. All right, so the fall off helped to taper it out, but what really made a difference was the distance. So I increased that from 0 to 100 centimeters, and I can confirm that they are in fact dying, scaling down to nothing much sooner. So I'll just go through these bottom events that we have and change the numbers everywhere and update you in a few seconds. All right, so I changed all the numbers and managed to fix it, I think, pretty well. So the pieces get smaller much faster and we don't have that big of a buildup of a wall up here. Now, what I had to do was go back to mainly the find target and the scale. So for the scale, I did distance of 50 and fall off of 500. And then I went into the find target and just increased the numbers everywhere. So wherever it was 8, I changed it to 15. Wherever it was 6, I changed it to 12. Wherever it was 10, I changed it to 20. So I just went through these about 10 or so find target operators that we have and just changed the numbers to increase them basically, because I needed to attract these pieces to the middle more so that they would get scaled down faster and create this effect that I wanted. So again, this is a completely sort of abstract, effect, not really based on reality. So it's completely up to you and whatever you find cool. If you'd like, the project file, of course, is under the video so you can look at exactly what I did. I am going to call this destruction finished. Now, one last thing that maybe I would do is just increase my timeline to 600 frames instead of 500. Now, of course, this is a ridiculously long shot, and it's very unlikely that you would ever work on a shot that's 600 frames long for anything like a feature film or a commercial or anything. It's only this long because I want you to see how the building slowly decays and gets destroyed. It's very likely that for a movie, this would only be a shot, maybe 2-3 seconds long of the building getting ripped apart, and then it would cut to something else, right? So this is mainly just an exercise to get you familiar with using all of these conditions and see how everything works. Pretty much we're just using some time tests, split tests, surface tests. We have some forces, some spin, but it's pretty simple stuff, just applied in different ways. So I hope that at this point, any doubts that you might have had about destruction are fading away. Now, don't forget that you can also enable gravity. You can disable all of the find target, and then the building will just crumble on itself as if a regular destruction were to occur, right? You don't necessarily need all of this vortex stuff to be happening. So keep that in mind. You can use this setup for all sorts of cool things. And in the next series of videos, we're gonna just apply some materials to this and add the smoke with Phoenix FD. So I'll see you there.